Celtic perhaps here. McNamara swings it in. Gorham comes for it. Oh, he's missed it completely. The chance shot for Tom. Still Celtic have it. Again, it's Jackie McNamara. And they get the equaliser. Alan Stubbs. In the 90th minute of the match, Alan Stubbs for Celtic. And what a relief all around Celtic Park. This keeps Celtic in contention. Well, a fan has run into the park, a couple of fans run into the park, but they're being escorted off. Jubilation among those Celtic fans. Alan Stubbs with his second goal of the season, and McNamara swung it in here. And it was Stubbs who rose above the ball and got the touch right into the far corner. Gordon could do nothing about that.
Well, I've hoped all night. It's been typical of these crosses all night. Nothing's came of it. They're eventually searching. Finally, Stubbs takes the initiative, gets above Richard Cobb. He's more determined in this one. He gets above him. It's a great header in the corner. And there is major relief from Celtic now.
But the night when Rangers showed great character again here at Parkhead. The final score, Celtic 1, Rangers 1.
So, Alan, in the lead up to a game like this, do you miss management?
Yeah. I think whenever you come into the national stadium and you're in a semi-final of a League Cup, then you'd always miss games like this. So, and it's a great game and all to come into. Playing against the Celtic Hibs. Celtic, obviously, we all know how dominant a force they've been over the last 18 months, and obviously Hibs have been promoted, and they've had a really good start to the new campaign, and they find themselves in a semi-final of the League Cup. So it's got the makings of a very entertaining game.
Are loyalties split for you?
Yeah, very much so. Obviously, I had a fantastic time at Celtic when I was a player, and we had a great bunch of players, and we had quite a bit of success, and obviously my time at Hibs, it's still very fresh in the memory, and we had the same. It was I look back on it very fondly, and as a successful period. I was disappointed that we didn't get promoted, which I felt we should have done, but we never. But the club have moved on, and they are where they should be now, and so very much divided loyalties on Saturday.
You mentioned there that the famous 2001 team that you played in.
Yeah.
How would you weigh that up against the current Celtic team?
I think it's difficult to measure, because I think we had when you look at the players in that squad at the time, we had a fantastic group of players. I think the whole climate and money situation of the then and now are completely different and all. I think we were, Celtic were in I think financially in a completely different place then. I think they were spending really big money to become very competitive, and I think after Martin left, I think there was a real change in direction with the way the club was spending. I think it got pulled back a little bit, and Brendan now is, I think, over the last 18 months has started to take that back in an upward spiral again. I think the Celtic are starting to, well, basically since they lost here in the semi-final, I think that was the turning point where Celtic and the board, had a good look at themselves and said, right, we need to address this again, and I think they've got stronger and stronger and stronger since then.
Yeah, I was at the semi-final as you mentioned, and it was such a horrible feeling.
And
to think that was kind of the catalyst for everything that happened up until now is pretty remarkable. One of the players that's been in and out of the Celtic team the past couple of seasons, Liam Henderson. You obviously worked with him at Hibs. Did you see his career after that cross to David Gray going a bit differently?
Yeah, I think he had such an impact, not just when he came on, but throughout that season for us. To obviously see him now, playing, a big part way in the team is obviously disappointing for Liam. I think he thought that was the catalyst for him to kick on and his career to progress, but unfortunately it hasn't gone in that direction, and if anything it's stalled a little bit for him.
Where do you see his next move being? Would it be maybe back to Hibs?
I think there was obviously must have been a lot of interest in him before the window closed, and whether that interest was something that Liam didn't feel was the right club for him, or the way the team played. There's obviously lots of things you have to weigh up, and maybe he just felt as if it just didn't feel right, and sometimes that can happen, but I think the most important thing for Liam is that he's playing week in and week out on a Saturday at 3 o'clock or whatever time that needs to be. He's not gonna get the satisfaction of playing under 21 football throughout the week, and and I know Liam the way I do is that he'll be desperate to be playing competitive football, and if it's not at Celtic, where I think Brendan's come out and said it's maybe best for him to find another club. Hopefully in January something will happen for him.
There's a cohort of ex-Celtic players that currently make up the Hibs team. Anthony Stubbs, F.A. Ambrose, Dylan McGee, and obviously Neil Lennon as the manager. Do you think that going into the game on Saturday, they think they've got something to prove maybe?
I think the only thing they've got to prove is to themselves. I think they've had the privilege and the honour of playing for Celtic, but that, in terms of Stokesy and Effie Ambrose and Dylan, that ship has sailed. In terms of what they did then, and this is a new chapter in their football career. In Lenny's, it's his management career. It's going to be obviously a great day for them again, but it's ultimately it's all about the players.
One of those Celtic players that starred in the 2H game last month was Cal McGregor. Were you quite surprised that McGregor and McGinn weren't included in any of the Scotland games?
Yeah, I was, looking from the outside looking in, but Gordon, had done a really good job up to that final game, and I think me personally, I actually watched that game than watching the England game, if I'm being honest, because I wanted Scotland to qualify. I think it's a much better World Cup or European Championship when Scotland are part of that. If anything, I wanted all the home nations to be there, and that would have been for me the icing on the cake for Gordon, because he'd picked the team up. They seemed to have really responded to a couple of the results. I think Lithuania result was probably the big result which stopped them from qualifying, and it was to be honest, I was gutted for Scotland fans, the players, as well as Gordon, that they never made it.
Do you think Gordon's reaction by the public to Gordon's comments about genetics might have fueled the fire a bit in trying to get rid of him? Yeah,
I think it certainly didn't help. I think all managers and coaches, and I think probably anybody who's got an element of football common sense knew exactly what he was trying to say. But I do think it got distorted and got completely blown out of proportion what he was trying to allude to. If anything, I think it was maybe the timing of the comment that probably didn't help.
Your former captain Paul Lambert, he said that the next Scotland manager should be someone that understands Scottish culture as well as watching the leagues. Who do you think that should be?
Well, I think that's it's a question for the SFA to gather a short list of who they think the right applicants are for the role. I'm always a believer that.
I thought you were going to say that you were the right man.
Yeah, I'm always a believer that it should be someone who's is either Scottish or had a time where they do know that. The same with England. I always think it should be someone who's got strong ties to that job, and I think there's a few credible candidates out there, and the ones obviously who've been mentioned, I think are probably the most favourite ones that spring to mind. David Moyes, Paul Lambert, but I think importantly is that you've got to have someone who wants the job. Not, I think, if they want to speak to me, they've got to want the job. And I think David Moyes just come out and said he'd be happy to speak to them. I don't know what Paul said. I think Paul would probably prefer to stay in club football right now. I don't know. So it doesn't leave a lot of candidates, left. Obviously, Alex here today, and I think Alex has said he'd be interested if they wanted to speak to him. So it's going to be interesting to see actually what line the SFA board go down in terms of the credentials that they're looking for this individual to take over the role.
Very interesting to see actually how they do approach it, because it's been 20 years next year since qualified, and whether they'll look to a homegrown manager or maybe spend a bit more money, get maybe a Gus Hiddink or someone. So it will be quite an interesting process to see what happens. But for you, what do you see being next? What's Alan Stubbs' next move?
Well, I'm obviously wanting to get back involved. I've had a really good break to reflect on, what went wrong and why it went wrong. And to be honest, I've been very honest in looking at myself and the reasons why, to make sure that I didn't make them again. I know, looking back now, and I've said it before, is that I probably left Hibs at least a year too early. I didn't do enough due diligence into looking at the next club, me or the people who look after me. I think we should have looked at what I was going into more and more, and if I would have known all that information, then I can certainly look back now and say that I wouldn't have took the job. So, it's as simple as that. But ultimately, you have to look at yourself, and I made mistakes. It's as simple as that. I'm not going to sit here and go, it was all their fault. I have to look at myself and I have to be honest. And yeah, I made mistakes.
Well, finally, about Celtic on Wednesday night, going to the Allianz Arena, Bayern Munich, one of footballing's superpowers. How do you see that one going for Celtic?
I think it's a very difficult game for them. You look at Celtic's group, you've got PSG and you've got Bayern Munich, and after watching PSG, you're thinking that they're going to be, or you would like to think that they're going to be at least, getting to the last four minimum, because they've been so impressive. Not just beating Celtic at Celtic Park, but then to go and beat obviously Bayern Munich in the manner that they did. I think that tells you how strong PSG are. Bayern have obviously changed manager. They go back to Henke, who's obviously been there before.
I think this is his fourth time.
Yeah, so obviously the players really know him, they respect him. He brings stability, and normal service resumes at the weekend with a 5-0 win. So I think it's going to be a very difficult night. Can I see Celtic taking anything from it? No. I think the most important thing, realistically, is that they put up a good fight. They come out the game unscathed in terms of injuries, and then they move on to Saturday for the semi-final.
Lennon driving forward, a great burst forward by Lennon. Finds Sutton, switches it wide to the right to Agat. Ball in, there's Sutton again, and that's a third. A magnificent goal for Celtic. 3-1 for Martin O'Neill's side, and again a fantastic finish.
Ravchik puts it across. Sutton trying to get there! Chris Sutton, Celtic lead! Simply superb. And he puts a free kick in, which Pete Trezeguet. Sutton! Simply superb! Nobody coming into the middle, and up he comes again. There's a goal! Sutton flicks the ball away. Celtic are in the lead. Brilliant, instinctive little flick from the inside of the foot. It's a goalkeeper's ball, or is it? Could be in again, and it's in. Yes, Sutton. A lovely little ball inside, and that's another one. A beautiful goal. Sutton finishes it off, and he applauds Larson.
That gets the break of the ball, crosses it, looking for Sutton. It's a header, and it's a goal for Chris Sutton.
Coming back strongly once again. Larson looking for a little bit of support. He's going to get it, and he does. Sutton has done it. 2-0. Surely that puts the game beyond doubt, and it's this man's brilliance at the base of a superb finish. Still pressure on Petrov. Petrov touched across again. There it is. Chris Sutton puts that in. Look at the way he dives forward, a bit like Batman that time. Still wondering how. Well, there's a bit of ball inside. It must be. It's there. The equaliser. Sutton has done it.
Fair enough, I think, to award the penalty kick. Now it's Camera at the other end. Sutton! Yes! What a start to this second half! Celtic Park erupts!
Chris, it's been quite an interesting week for Scottish football. Gordon Strachan was obviously rendered unemployed. Do you agree with the decision?
Yeah, I mean, I said last week, I think that ultimately he's failed in 2 campaigns, and there's more to do with what he said, after. To say he had no regrets, I just don't get that, because ultimately it was his team selection which cost Scotland. He didn't play Lee Griffiths at the start of the campaign, and had he done that, then things may have been different.
In the head-to-head game with Slovakia, lost 3-0 away, and then it was
another team selection. There were no Celtic players in the game against Lithuania. I mean, and that was 10 days after the Champions League, where they played particularly well against Manchester City. Then going into the Slovakia game, I think he got his selection wrong as well. And when he started to pick the Scottish-based players, Scotland actually started to get results. So while it was, people always look to the last game in Slovenia, and I understand that, but the campaign was lost at the start.
Do you also think there's something in what John Clark and Jim Craig said yesterday about playing Kieran Tierney on the left as opposed to the right? Do you think he's a bit nullified playing on the right?
I think that's horses for courses, really, and in terms of I can understand why Gordon wanted to play Andrew Robertson on the left. He wants to play I think at that point it was trying to play his best players or try and find a way to get both of them on the field. So I get that decision.
Strachan's record in Europe with Celtic.
Well, I think it was some and some. In fair, I think in fairness to Gordon, I think he did well in the Champions League at Celtic. I think that was, it wasn't just Gordon. That was the team I played in under Martin in the Champions League, especially. Very good at home, very poor away. It was a little bit different. The UEFA Cup run, of course, but there's no doubt about it that we underachieved away from home in the Champions League.
So what would you attribute Brendan Rodgers' upturn in success away from home in Europe?
Look, I think that that last season the performances against Manchester City and Mönchengladbach were very good. I think that Anderlecht this season, the response, from adversity, after the PSG game was excellent, and Celtic have always responded under Brendan Rodgers. So in that respect, I think it's a positive thing. When you go away and you feel like you have a chance of getting results, but obviously you need to sort the home form out of it.
So in a position where you were in a really quite successful Celtic team, when you looked to these away games, was there a mindset in it that maybe we're not going to get anything from this game?
No, not at all. The mindset was we can go out and we can beat anybody on our day. I think we had some bitterly poor performances. Probably the worst was against Anderlecht, actually, away when they went down to 10 men. Against the likes of Munich, the year we played Bayern Munich, actually, it was a game we really should have got something from. And it's easy after the event to say we should have got something from it, but our performance warranted a result. Alan Thompson scored and then they got back in it, and a goalkeeping error really cost us at the death. But I don't think with the team we had we ever felt inferior, albeit you respected the opposition who you played against, whether it was Bayern Munich or Barcelona or whoever. We respected the opposition, but we didn't think it was impossible to get a result.
But if Celtic were to perhaps adopt a kind of carefree approach to the result, doesn't really matter, go out, express yourselves and try and get something, would you say there's anything in that thought process?
I think the thought process is to learn lessons of which they did after the PSG game when they played in Anderlecht. They're brave on the ball, courageous, and this is upper level, there's no doubt about that. So they have to, where they failed against PSG is they weren't brave enough on the ball, weren't courageous enough, and so that's something which I hope Celtic have learned from, because nothing will change in terms of the way Bayern Munich will set up. They'll set up and they'll press Celtic. They'll feel that they're superior player for player. So on that basis, for the Celtic players, it's a bit of it's not a free game by any accounts, but it's one of the games the mentality should be we've got absolutely nothing to lose in this game and everything to gain, so why not be brave.
Stop a bit talking about Celtic and I'll cover other teams in Scotland. You said earlier that Aberdeen you don't think have started yet. Where can you see them going this season? They're already out, obviously, the Betfred Cup.
I think it's the Betfred Cup. I mean, we did the game on the night and Motherwell were particularly good. I think that Aberdeen, it's great signs for Aberdeen. I really, really do. Had a busy summer. They lost key players, last season, and so it was always going to be tricky for Derek McInnes. But it's a good sign when you're finding a way to win games and you're not at your best. I think encouraging for them. Kenny McLean played well at the weekend, but they've accumulated a good points tally and not been at the best. So when they do start clicking, then that'll be good for them and not so good for other teams in the league.
So do you think next Wednesday the Celtic Aberdeen clash at Tawdry, do you think that's the biggest test of Celtic's unbeaten run?
I think they're very similar games in terms of Hibs at the weekend, and Aberdeen. Celtic won't be able to let's put it this way: they don't get a lot of rest between Wednesday and Saturday. But you know, there's no point bleating about that. You just have to get on with it as part and parcel of playing at a big club. I think they'll be tested by Hibs and then Aberdeen. Aberdeen have got to sort of make a bit more of a statement this year in terms of the head-to-heads v Celtic last year. Celtic dominated and won them all. But the way things are, you know, this is a time for somebody to take advantage of Celtic. So I think it's a bigger game for Aberdeen than it is for Celtic in that respect. And there's all ifs and buts. But you know, if they did get a result against Celtic, that would do wonders for them.
You're also at Hampden Park on Friday. Did you enjoy watching Rangers?
I thought I was really impressed with them. I thought it was a big test for them. You know, St Johnstone is a battle-hardened team, and I thought we learnt enough or a lot about Rangers in terms of their ability to see the game through, to win the game, and to win it in the style they did. I think Alves is a big player for them. I think him coming back in just gives them that sort of safety valve, bit of security at the back. I thought, you know, set piece wise, he seemed to head everything, so he's a really important player, and you know, they won well, so you have to give them credit for that.
Do you think the players have really rallied round Pedro Caixinha in the past couple of weeks? Obviously the Hampton game,
I mean, you know, it's various sort of questions asked, you know, the sort of situation at Hamilton. I think that you know, fundamentally it's about what results Rangers get on the field and the way they perform, and you know, you can only be positive about them with the way they performed at St Johnstone. You know, they you know, responded especially well.
And last of all, who do you think the next Scotland manager should be?
Who do I think it should be? No, it's fine. Look, I think that Michael O'Neill would seem to be a logical appointment. I said the other day Big Sam, but I think he's ruled himself out. So I think that, you know, Michael O'Neill has done wonders at Northern Ireland, so I don't think they'd go far wrong with him. I think it'd be a popular appointment.